Today I'm talking to the renowned anti-feminist psychiatrist, Dr. Hannah Spier. We're going to be exploring why modern women have become so unhappy. Enjoy. So Hannah, I wanted to start off by asking you about why women are so unhappy. You know, when I look at the statistics, I see that nearly 18% of women are taking antidepressants, which is nearly double the rate in men. How do you make sense of this? Why in the United States, you know, and I imagine it's the same in the rest of the world, do we have nearly a fifth of the population of women taking antidepressants?
Yeah, you know, that's what had me start to write and start to do this psychobabble project that I did 2 years ago, because what pained me the most, that was, well, all these women in their 30s, late 30s, who were childless and they were devastated about that. And I just kept asking myself how they get in that situation. And I started to recognize sort of three archetypes. And by that, I mean, I had a lot of women, you know, we go into psychiatry, probably felt the same, because we're interested in schizophrenia. We're interested in these extreme cases. And that, I mean, that's, as a med student, that's what jumps out at you. But in the end, you're mostly sitting there with anxious, depressed, burnt out women. They're the majority of patients in mental health. So that's sort of your bread and butter. And so I saw a lot of women, and I just saw that they, depending on their age, almost presented with the same sort of symptoms. So that the 20-year-olds would have sudden onset panic and anxiety attacks. Then in their 30s, it would look like more of a burnout, depression, and then later on, of a moderate to severe depression. And when I looked at it through a different lens than what I had been taught, I think it has a lot to do with us repressing our biological drives, with this postmodern idea of anything can be explained through an internalized narrative rather than facing external realities. And the psychological community is very much guilty of that. I don't think that we stress to young women enough how much of their maternal desires they're going to feel. I think we tell them to be financially independent first and foremost, that is going to be what makes them happy, and that their career is going to be more meaningful than what it ends up being. And so many girls go into these very difficult degrees that, in my experience, a lot of them weren't really interested in. And so many have attachment disorders, attachment needs that aren't fulfilled. And that is expressed in this intense need for intimate relationships that their co-eds won't fulfill, because they're guys in their 20s. After 2 weeks, they're nowhere to be found. And so they're in this motivational conflict, be it in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. There's a huge gap between what is and how they want things to be. And because they are lied to about what they're going to want, that will be expressed in deep psychological distress that we then tend to medicate. So that's how I've come to look at it.
Okay, there's a lot there. Maybe we could just go over more about what you said. I mean, what are we telling women to do? Because you said there's biological realities, but then there's also this narrative that you make it sound like society is pushing on them. What is?
Hmm.
Tell me more about that narrative. You touched on it, but I just want to understand that better.
Right. So take the women in their 30s. Now, they grew up with Gilmore Girls, which is the show that's still being
Okay.
watched. And this is just an example. And what happens there? You have this gorgeous young girl who is effortlessly achieving, very smart and intelligent and high achieving. So she does whatever she sets out to do. And when she goes off to college and she gets into Yale, everything goes her way. She just dispenses with all of her relationships that she was happy in, and that has no effect on her whatsoever. And so everyone wants to think that they are this Rory Gilmore character, effortlessly achieving, in need of no intimate relationship, able to focus on their very difficult degrees, going towards that career, without really thinking about what comes next. But a very small subset of girls are that conscientious, with very low neuroticism, with very, very low need for meaningful, intimate relationships. And when we're in our 30s, there's this hormonal feedback from declining ovarian reserves. That's something that we're not told about. We're told that the biological clock is a cliche that you can get over, you can choose to listen to or not. So girls are led to believe that, for example, it's just as normal not to want to have kids as to want them. That is wrong. There's a very small subset of women for whom motherhood isn't intended. That's not a calling to them, but they have a very particular personality that is very rare. And that's something women aren't told. We are led to believe that we can be Rory Gilmore, who can go through a degree effortlessly without having meaningful relationships. And then there's the single motherhood aspect of that, which is romanticized and glorified, and that is just fine. But a lot of girls now are also raised with not a lot of emotional responsiveness from their mothers. Like, mothers were sent out to work. A lot of domestic chores and childcare has been outsourced, and that has an effect, especially on girls. So there's an attachment need there that needs to be filled. And when they think that they can fill that with ambition, something goes wrong. And that's why I kept seeing this 20-something-year-old girl being completely stuck in her degree. She couldn't get further because she was spiraling. She had anxieties, very often related to her health, with no prior psychiatric history. And because of that spiral, she was getting negative reports in school, so negative performance reviews, insomnia that leads to, as we know, more anxieties. So she's in this negative feedback loop she cannot get out of, and desperately trying to date guys that don't want to commit.
Now, there's so many interesting things you've mentioned here, but I want to touch on you said these different chapters. Well, actually, let me ask you this. It's often presented that this is progress, and, you can get canceled essentially for saying otherwise. It's meant to be progress that women, they're able to compete with men in the workforce. They're able to compete at college. There's all of these things that there's, these choices where, you don't have to follow a more traditional female role, being, a stay-at-home mom or a caretaker. This is seen as sort of shrugging off the past and almost oppressive traditional roles, and that this is progress. So why? Where is all of that coming from? Because if I'm reading into what you're saying that that's that's actually not really in the best interest of most women. I hear you saying that
Mm-hmm.
some women that works for, but for most women to shrug off these more traditional
Right. So I think that
feminine roles,
I
that's
lay
not a
a
good
lot of
thing.
that at the
Yeah.
feet of the feminist ideology that already started in the
Okay.
1800s. And its objective was very much to destroy the family, because they saw the family as oppressive to the woman. That is where she was chained. And you have very prominent feminists in the, like Betty Friedan. She called housewifery a comfortable concentration camp. They used very extreme language, and they started this trend that a woman is only important if she goes out to work and she does her daughter a service by showing her that she can also be this important and go to board meetings. And that is where the real value lies. So there's no, if you go to career days at schools, you don't see stay-at-home moms showing up and saying how much joy and happiness that brings them, how much value they feel that gives them. You see doctors and lawyers and all those women are given booths and platforms. But the women that I see who are the most fulfilled and happy in their lives have from the get-go been very family oriented and taken that into every consideration that comes to choosing their mate wisely, someone that has the same value system as they do, and choosing a career that is a job, because most people have jobs and not really careers when it gets down to it, that are interruptible. And that is how it always was for women. It wasn't, we're given this idea that housewives, that's this housewives of the 60s, that they were just at home and bored and had no role, and the father went off to work and he was gone all day. No, it used to be the house economic project. It used to be that women were, as they contributed to the household finances with whatever they could do. And this work was usually interruptible. So very compatible with childcare. Not that they didn't contribute. So we have a very false image of what it is to be a full-time mom. That came from the feminists in the 1800s with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and all of her friends when they formed the Declaration of Sentiments in 1848. And if you go to what they wrote and look at their language, it's all very resentful. They're not concerned with the welfare of women. They were resentful of the men in their own class, because these were very privileged, rich women. And they weren't concerned with how what this would look like for normal women. And you see this again and again, that the feminist ideology isn't concerned with the welfare of women. They just want to further a very small subset of already very privileged women.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correct, so there are a group of women who may be more competitive and they want to compete with the men because that's their personalities or their leanings. And so they create this, they start to promote a narrative that men are being oppressive and all of this, but that doesn't really apply to most women. And so if we were going to take a different tack, I mean, for the women who aren't like that, what should really be emphasized for them? And like how should we be helping them as a society find their way to a life where they can be happier and more fulfilled?
Yeah. I think you do well in saying, how can we as a society? Because this is very much, I think the unhappiness of women is due to having created a society that devalues exactly what women really want in the end, right? It is devastating to us when we can't meet our maternal desires, and people rage against that. But we see it in the therapy rooms with these devastated 30-something-year-olds who were told that they had all the time in the world, who were told that women are still fertile at 39 and there are so many things you can do. And then they sit there with their hormone therapy and their IVF treatments, and it's hell. It is. I've guided them through it, and they are in hell. It's painful. It's upsetting to the relationship. It's not easy. It very often doesn't work. And all they can think about, all their cognitive processes, they are geared towards this: I need to get pregnant. I need to get pregnant now. And everything falls to the side. And so we need to highlight that there is value in motherhood alone, in being a mother, without having to juggle a lot of different things. You don't have to be a mother on the side. Motherhood isn't a hobby. It is incredibly difficult to raise a child into a functioning adult. We're seeing it now. We're seeing how many people are turning towards medication because they're in despair. They don't know how else to keep going. Even when they know it's bad for them, they say yes to the medication they're offered. So we see how society has failed so many women by not telling them that these biological realities are going to hit you like a tidal wave, and you better be ready for it. You have to set up your life so that you can maneuver, because that's what happens when we set up our lives according to these lies that feminism has told us. For example, that it's just as normal not to want to have kids. For example, that you have all the time in the world. For example, that a career is going to be as meaningful for you. So even for those women who glide through their career, even for the Rory Gilmores, in the end, so that what they do is that they glide through their 20s and they ride a sort of dopamine wave, right? Because they hit milestone after milestone, and that gives you a dopamine hit because you are aligned with your goal. What happens when they turn 30 is that goal suddenly isn't where it was all along. Suddenly it shifts. And that's a subconscious thing. And they need help realizing that goal has shifted. And it's much easier to tell yourself further lies than to come to that realization. To turn your mindset is a very psychologically painful, difficult thing, as we know. And so that is something to be aware of, that even if in your 20s you think that this is all that matters to you, you're going to fall victim to those biological realities. And when you do, you want to have set up your life so that you have something to catch you.
When I think about this, I mean, as a millennial, this is really relatable to me, especially as a millennial who's a professional and's gone through medical school. It's very hard for me to look out and see women who are happy. And I talk to my wife because we also look at a lot of the, friends. We've had some friends who, they're divorced already. And the story is, and you would laugh at some of these stories, but but they're real. We had, two doctors, both with debt, and one of them was hell-bent on going to an Ivy League school. And the other one was at an Ivy League school, but it was in a different city. And they already had one child, and there was no compromise. One of the parents said, it's always been my dream to go to this school, and so I'm going to do it. And so with a child who was, one, they ended up going to different places to do their residency, which is 4 years. And it was so stressful, and there was so much resentment and difficulty with child rearing because the parents really weren't there to help either. that they ended up with a divorce with a 1-year-old. And I look at the other. I mean, I think another thing that I notice a lot, which is really troubling, is actually the isolation of women as well. Many people will move for the work of either the one or both, either the husband or the wife, and you end up, and I know this from my own life, you end up in a completely new environment, thousands of miles away from home or your friends, or maybe you even stay home and your parents move and all of your friends move. I feel like we're also having families in isolation. And then it is particularly hard because I think I think the world is set up actually a lot easier for men. I mean, we go out and we work, and I kind of look at our lives, and it seems like the same hunter-gatherer type of thing, where the men, they're out in their jobs and they're working towards their mission. And, if they like the people they work with and what they're doing, that it seems natural to go out and, bring home the bacon, and you work in these teams to deliver some service to get money. And you can kind of do that anywhere. The men sort of just like disappear into their jobs.
Yeah.
But I often see the women just get left in isolation. They do get left in the home, or they get left in communities where culturally they're different, and they're not. I feel like the community has also completely broken down.
Yeah, we're very atomized. We see it in the rise of postpartum depression, and they say, look how hard kids are on women, right? But no, it's that women are alone. Mothers are not meant to be alone. They're meant to be surrounded by their sisters and mother and mother-in-law and their friends. Like, we are evolved to child rear in groups while the men go out to hunt and gather. And when we don't have that, that's why we have this epidemic of women are friendless. And we see it everywhere. Female adult friendships are so hard. Women find this very tough because women need to share goals with their friends or activities. And we no longer do that because you have like one married mother who has a bunch of single childless friends. And those friendships become very strained for that mother who is alone. What does she need? She needs someone to go to the playground with, because it's really boring to be on the playground alone with your kid, right? It's just, you stand there. What are you going to do? You want to talk to other moms about the birthday party planning and all that, all the things you do as a mom, which you actually quite like talking about with other moms who don't think it's silly. And it's, it seems like a frivolous thing, but it's enough to make women quite depressed. When they don't have that, they feel all alone. So that's, and also, I mean, in the 60s, we were medicating housewives with barbiturates because, yes, there's this cliche of the bored housewife, but life became, because they were meant to contribute with interruptible work. And suddenly we had it's sort of the role of the mother it didn't sort of recuperate after the Industrial Revolution, right? Things became, we had the washing machine and we had this and that and the other to help us. And we were sort of standing there. We lost a lot of community with that. It didn't follow properly. So we need to get to a new place where motherhood is valued again, where mothers have community, where they can contribute intellectually without being the lawyer who goes off to her corporate job, because women aren't happy in their corporate jobs while juggling motherhoods. Surveys tell us that women now they report less happiness now than they did in the 60s and 70s. So women are themselves saying that we're much more unhappy now. And as you said, we see it in the prescriptions and in the numbers and coming out of mental health. We see that women are suffering much more now. So we have built a society that devalues what we inherently want to do, but we are told to be ashamed of what we really want.
A lot of this I think about from my own life, and what I speak to my wife about. And I mean, we go through our lives, and we want to try and build our Eden. You want to build a wonderful life for yourself. As you go into the future, and it just, no one ever talks to you about it. And, from my vantage point now being, I'm 35 now, and I look at it, and man, I would have done so many things differently, and my wife would have as well. We would have definitely, and this is something we can still build towards. I think community is really important. I mean, my wife, she's a psychiatrist, and so, but she really helps more with the back end of the business because it's interruptible. And so she doesn't need to be doing clinical work where she's answering emergency calls on the weekend and late at night looking after patients. She tried to do that for 3 years after my daughter was born, and she stopped because we just fought all the time, because every time our daughter was sick, someone had to take time off work, and I was always busier than her. And so she was constantly having to cancel patients, and I wasn't budging because I was stubborn. And so we fought a lot. Eventually we had to go through the hard decision where it's like, well, for our relationship, it actually makes more sense for you to just support the business rather than work in it. And that was a whole complex because she's American, and she spent $500,000 on student loans to get this high powered career, which is actually, harmful for the relationship and not working. And then we also pushed off having kids. We've had one child, and gosh, we've been trying to have another child, but it hasn't been easy. We haven't been doing IVF or any of that, but it's still hard. And we would have done that earlier as well, if not for, this extended medical education that ended up going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the same experience, right? I was devastated. I went back to work, and my daughter, I put her in daycare. That lasted 7 months. And all I was doing was in the bathroom just crying, just missing her, just wanting to get to her. And everything that had meant something to me before just completely stopped meaning anything. That was my wake-up call. I was like, my whole 20s was just geared towards this, getting this degree and becoming a psychiatrist. And now I have it. I have it. It's all there for the taking, and I just don't want it anymore. I just want to be with my baby. That was just such a huge wake-up call, how something that I thought was so important just completely stopped meaning anything. And the opposite happened to my husband. His career completely took off once I just said, you just have to, figure out a way to support the whole family, because this is awful for me. I want to be with my baby full time. So he got anxious. I had to sort of figure out, how do I make up for a doctor's salary? How do I, but that completely spurred him on, and his career just really took off. So he got a lot more ambitious when he had a child. So I think the society we have built is harder on women. But I also see men are suffering because they have lost a lot of their role as well. It used to be men had to sort of stand outside of the cave with their bat and protect us because we were vulnerable in labor and after. So that was I'm just going to stand outside of this cave with my bat, and that's where I'll be, and I'll protect you. I'll make sure everything's fine, and you go do what women do. This is very rough, but in that role, they thrived. And now women have sort of said, I can do both. I can take the bat. I don't need, I have this, I have maternity leave, I have all these things. And I see a lot of men are very lost as well. And they have anxieties. Why wouldn't they? And they're not treated well in the medical and the mental health field. We don't know what to do with men who are suffering.
Yeah. Well, we've just come out of a period of incredible wokeness in the US, and if you were a man and you were ambitious, you were made to feel like you had privilege, and and that you were taking away from other people, and that you needed to make space at the table for other people, and that you were oppressing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way that culturally that men were looked at in the last 10 years was as total, bastards.
Yeah.
Especially in the professional world.
Yes, I've had a lot of male clients who were terrified at work. Really, they're berated for writing "Hi guys" in emails, and this "What did I say now?" and "Who overheard me?" And it's no longer a place where they can go and have a collegial feeling, to have male bonds, male friendships. They're very afraid of stepping out of line, and they see they can work for years and see women being promoted ahead of them, and that's going to affect you. If you're for or against that, you have to admit how that will have a negative effect on men's mental health.
Oh, well, another point I just wanted to pick up on a line of thought that I had before. Another thing that seems really important to me moving forward is the importance of building your life in a community of other parents or people that you like, where there's more interaction. I mean, in my own life, I've been thinking about, I'd love to start a hospital, at least some kind of residential facility where I can be with my family, and we can have people there that are like-minded and share our values. And it ends up being much more social, as I've gotten older, and, believe me, I like remote work as much as the next person. But I have to tell you, I mean, it can be very isolating. And I see myself moving in the opposite direction, yearning for in-person interaction in a facility or in some, in a place where, I can be around like-minded people. And I think that's what I'll spend the second half of my life doing, is building in-person community, because as we've been very successful in our business, and we're doing great, but there's a huge gap of just spontaneous community that happens on a day-to-day basis that is missing. And all of these things just naturally happened, I think, before the world became so mobile, and women were pushed into the workforce, and they had to go and work and look after the kids, and you move around a lot. It's almost, I feel like, we're going back in time trying to recreate something that used to happen very naturally.
Yeah, we have lost a sense of how and why we evolved to, and what we need, and I think part of the reason also why I called my podcast Psychobabble, and what I'm writing about is how the psychological community is very much contributing to hiding these facts, and to thinking that you can compensate for everything, right? If you don't find meaning in if you choose not to have a child, for example, then you can compensate for that with something else. Then you find another path. And this, comes from the postmodernist influence into psychology and psychiatry very much, that, you can construct your own meaning in life. And that is not set. And there are no objective truths. It's all what you subjectively feel. That is your truth, and that cannot be disputed. And you can make that truth. And that is simply not true. We are very much unaware of what we have established as in evolutionary psychology. I think that that plays a big role in us not building our lives properly, as you say, communities. How important it is for us to have this, to have friends, to build sort of, because our mental health has to stand on different pillars. And you see this with any psychotherapy that works. It's building up these pillars onto which you have that you can sort of put your psychological wellness, if you will. I don't like the term mental health, but okay, there you go. And that is friends, a job that provides financial stability, a hobby, so self-interest, for men, a legacy, and for women, these meaningful, intimate relationship, aka motherhood. And you can, and we have had roles for women previously where they weren't mothers, right? You had nuns, for example. But it's very difficult to find this alternative path. And it usually involves having other kids because that's what they did. They turned to childcare. They turned to being someone for someone else. So, and psychologists aren't really aware of this. So they think that you sitting there hour after hour trying to construct a different internal narrative will help you. And that's when people are stuck in therapy for much longer than they need to be. Because what you need to do is to go out and make that community life that you're talking about. Well, you need to really go back to the basics. Go make friends, go out, have a schedule. This is very sort of CBT, right? You have to go and do, you have to show people kindness and you get kindness back. You have to have those meaningful relationships. You have to make sure that there's something for the next generation. We need that. That gives us meaning when we have responsibility for that person that only has you. That's what's so special with kids. You are the only one that can do the best job for that little person. And so you cannot compensate for that. Yeah. They have lost a lot of established knowledge. Personality is one of these things that they completely misunderstand or repress.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you said it well. I mean, some of the things that are incredibly important are treated as an afterthought. You know, there's no, and these are unpopular things, but if you're a woman, it's great to find a man who's very competent and a good provider who treats you well. That's probably one of the most important things you ever do for most women. It's you need to have community as well. And you need to find a man, who will have children with you. So you have an outlet for that nurturing maternal instinct of yours. And we don't talk about these things. So maybe we can shift our conversation in that direction. I mean, what's missing? And you mentioned these 3 different periods in a woman's life, and you talked about the 20s, you talked about the 30s, you talked about the 40s. How should we as a society be guiding women so that they can set their lives up in a way where they feel happy and we don't have to have 20% of them taking Prozac?
Yeah. Or worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I already now start to guide her a little. I think one of these things is I have to counteract the narratives that she will be told. Very young girls are already told that they live in a patriarchy, that the world is out to get them, that no matter what they do, they'll be oppressed. So I have a very good example of this. It's so every weekend we get ourselves dressed and we go to pray. And so they have to wear their nicest clothes. And a couple of months ago, I was helping her, and she needed to put on her pantyhose, which every woman knows it's terribly uncomfortable. But you just have to. And she said, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to put on these? Why can't I go in what my brothers wear? I also have a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old son. So why can't I wear what they wear? And they can wear these loose, comfortable things. And then I almost caught myself saying, yeah, well, the world just is unfair, because that's what I heard. The world just is unfair to women. Learn to deal with it. Instead, I called her brother over and I said, like, feel this tie, feel this. Is this as comfortable as you think it is? Would you want to wear, would you want to wear this tight? And you can wear this dress. It's nice. It's soft. Yeah, you have to wear your pantyhose, but the rest of it's very nice. Just trying to nuance it a little bit. So you can teach girls from very early on to start resenting what they're given in life, or you can start to see it as, men and women are complementary, and there are things that are uncomfortable to you, but there are also things that you get. Yeah, you have to go through pregnancy, and that's rough, and you have to go through birth, and that's rough, but you get to bond with your baby in a way that the father never gets to. And in many cases, they're envious of us for that connection, that the baby already knows us when they're born. So, but all you hear is how uncomfortable this is and how many women are suffering because of this and that. And so I'm trying to bring her up and sort of showing her a different way to approach these things where she'll naturally think, oh, why me? And I see this with women, young women. They enter relationships with this basic resentment of men, and that can destroy the relationship from the inside. Always the question, why do I have to, right? Why do I have to take off work to be with the kid? And why do I have to? And you cannot form a healthy relationship with that attitude. And the younger you realize that there are certain things that you're going to have to do differently than men so that you don't end up in very risky situations, the better. You are vulnerable as a woman. There are rules that apply to you that don't apply to men, but the same is true for men. There are rules that apply to men that don't to us. But because we live in a society that's very much geared towards gender neutrality and women behaving like men, because that's the only way we can have success, because success is defined in male terms, that we just, they forgo this knowledge and this approach to life. So I wouldn't tell her to study medicine or study law, unless it's you can study medicine and law, but you can look at it as, this is a way to have an education that I can do whatever I want with, right? I don't now work in the clinic, but I contribute. And you can do this, but if you already form this, and you'll laugh, but a lot of young girls that I've had in therapy, they have this vision from the movies, like they want that corporate job, because then they can wear this and this type of outfit and go to work with it, and I'm going to look like this, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to be so cool. And it's very clearly not based in reality. And they end up very disappointed.
Let me just interrupt you.
Yes, please.
I feel like you would be made to feel bad if you did that. Like let's say you're a young woman and you say, well, God, I've got the grades to become a lawyer, but I really don't want that because I want to have something more balanced later on in my life. I'm going to do real estate. I'm going to do real estate because it's a career where I can kind of start and stop. I can pick how many houses I'm working on. I'm going to really focus on I'm going to focus on my looks. I'm going to work in a way where I can exercise, I can look after my body, I can make myself very attractive. And then I'm going to try and find a great mate. I'm going to find a guy that that I trust and who I think is going to be a really good partner. And that's just the way I'm going to do things. I feel like other women would look at you like, that's like, you can't do it. That's a bad thing. You should be able to do it all on your own and have this job. And in many ways that might actually be the most logical thing for most women to actually do, where you have, because let me tell you this, as a 2-physician family, like I would have loved it if my wife did something else, like real estate. We don't need 2 doctors in this family. That doesn't really serve us to have these 2 high, professionals. Anyway, I was hoping you could comment a little bit on that and just the judgment that leads to.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have personal experience with that when I said, I'm not, when my kids are small, I'm not going to have a hospital job. And this is much more important to me. And I quit altogether. People were nasty. They told me like, what a waste. You're doing your daughter a disservice by not showing her how you're working. All these different people cut contact with me altogether. I had to go out and look for new friends. It was quite tough. So I see what you're saying. That is, but in the end, you have to tell your daughter, or if it's you have to tell yourself that those who are shaming you, they're doing it as an expression of their own shortcomings. They wouldn't do that if they were happy and fulfilled in their lives, because that is not how you behave when you are happy and content. So this is an attitude you meet from resentful, angry women who are very often jealous. And if that is what you are being told, then that is not a friendship or an acquaintance you should keep, because their friends wish you well. So change your environment. That is, it's a simple solution, but it's not easy to do.
Yeah, people don't like it when, because it's almost like you're breaking the rules. If they have an ideology and it's like, no, you have to do this. You cannot rely on a man. Should not set up your life in that way. If they see someone else doing it, they're just like, hang on a second. You can't do that. You have to do all of this other difficult stuff that I'm doing. This is the way. And so I can see that. Something else I wanted to talk about, which is probably, it's just reality and truth, but I know it's not popular. I mean, we talk about the value of men and women in different points in life. And I've heard you speak to this before about how important it is for women to capitalize on their looks and their beauty and their youth in their 20s, and to not waste that period of time, because I feel like socially men, in many ways, I think the value of a man is kind of at its lowest, when he's, a teenager and can't really do anything. But it continues to rise, probably up until the 60s. And then, when the career and, the power and all of the earning potential goes away, it sort of dips off. But it's very different for women. That there's this sort of peak when there's youth. And then you're not sort of put on this pedestal anymore. Society doesn't. It's very unpopular. Society doesn't value you in this same way as this object that you're yearned after. You transition into a different role where you have value within your community and within your family.
Yeah.
And I would love it if you could speak to that a little, because I don't hear people talk about that and how important that is.
Yeah, it's a very unpopular. It's a very inflamed issue, because women have leverage in their 20s. Men are attracted to signals of fertility. Youth use signals fertility. So And that's just the way it is. That's just one of these biological realities. Men like signs of fertility. I think that's just common sense. And of course we have that, unless you have a serious weight loss from your 20s to your 30s, most women look more fertile in their 20s than in their 30s. And we're wasting those years on achieving financial independence. We're wasting it on dating like men do. And I just see women come and they don't date with intention. That's the nice way of saying it. They're in college. They have one date after the other. In the periods where they will have a relationship for a couple of weeks, they come into therapy. They're happy. You can see that their body language is different. And then when he's nowhere to be found, then she's depressed again. It's very clear what they need, what they want, although they refuse to accept it in many cases. But yeah, so we therapists very much waste women's time by not telling them this, that they have leverage now to choose a mate that will be the best provider and the best option for you. So that's what I tell my daughter. Like, you have to focus at least as much on choosing your mate when you have the best leverage as you do on whichever degree you choose. Because people go to study all the time. People change their jobs all the time, just like that. But if you get stuck with the wrong mate, if you wait too long and then have to choose a mate that is not as good a man as the one you had the possibility of attracting in your 20s, that is something that can land you in a very bad situation. Women are more vulnerable, but our strength is that we choose the mate. It's always been like that with humans. So instead of just focusing on the bad situations we can land in and how we can be victimized, which is true. There is abuse and there is that, but we can mitigate that risk by acting when we have that leverage and not 10 years later. So that is my point. That is what I'm teaching my daughter, and that she needs to also, when it comes to abuse, because that's the most common thing that I hear from people, right? When they hear me speak, it's what about abusive situations? Like, what about risks to women? And that is true. But if you choose someone who's in your community where people know him, where we are also involved in meeting him, who is the best at scoping out psychopathy and sociopathy in a man? That's your father and your brothers and your community, because they haven't tossed him out, right? So here we come back again to this atomized society, right? That because psychopathy is always, it's always revealed. People won't stand for psychopathic traits for longer than a few years. That's why they have to keep moving. They're fired. They don't have long-term relationships. And so if you choose a mate in your community where people know him, they know he's a good guy, they know he's kind, he doesn't have these traits, he's been around, he's kind to his parents, he has friends for many years, and your father and brother get along with him, then that's already puts you in a much safer position as a woman than when you just have to get a husband quickly at the age of 35 because your time is running out. And nobody around you knows this person, because that is very often what I see in women, that they choose someone who nobody knows. No, there's no record. You know what I mean? And that is a very risky thing to do, because you cannot know just for meeting someone a few times if he's a narcissist or not. I mean, you can't know those things. You have to look at a person's track record. And now I got to be lost because we got back to the whole community situation. But I think that is what I mean with leverage. You have, men are attracted to signs of fertility, and those signs are there from 18, it starts to wane at 28. That is when we are the most fertile. And unless you're not taking care of yourself, which is very often now, drink a lot of alcohol, you don't look good, you're overweight, and then you manage to lose that and get in shape, and then you might look better at 32 than you did at 22, of course. But generally speaking, that is when you should work. You should spend as much time on dating with intention in your 20s as you do with your career. So that's what I'm telling my daughter.
Well, and I think one of the things that most people probably know someone like this. And, I've seen it time and time again, that you have someone that has sacrificed everything for their career, and now they're 35, and it's really hard for them to find someone, because they're older, and, they're looking for someone who's more successful than them as well, career-wise. But these very successful men are going for women who are younger sometimes. And then that's this whole thing, where you spend so much time chasing the career that now you're settling for a mate when you wouldn't have had to have done it in that way.
Right.
And it's because
it's risky.
you have this drive, like, I have to have kids now, and that's a very painful place to be. Yeah.
And then again, it's easy to be jealous then of men, and men are like this, and they're, consumers of women, but we do the same, and we don't like to talk about that either. Women in general, we choose men who are 3.5 years older, ahead, taller, and have a better financial situation than us, so a better degree, like you said. That is what we choose again and again. I mean, Tinder now introducing this height criteria where you can really check, because women claim that men lie about their height on Tinder, and then because that is so important to us that a man is taller. And so from their perspective, that's also unfair. But that's just how it is. That is just how we choose. We want someone who's bigger than us because he's meant to protect and provide. And, postmodernists can dislike that as much as they want, but the data is there. We have all the data now from the dating apps, and this is how we choose. So like it or not, but I think we're better off acting with that knowledge.
I want to just spend just a quick minute to ask you, what does it look like putting these women together? The ones that, they've missed it. Late 30s, hard to find a guy. It's having regret about not being able to have children as their peers moving on. What is that work like for you in your in your practice?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I have had it a lot. This woman, usually 35, 36, who's been in a relationship for a long time and then stuck in that relationship because this is the second archetype that I draw, because that happens so much, that happens so often, this type of patient, and should have a good degree and a good job, sort of, as I said, rode that wave of achievement through her 20s and got that stable relationship with someone who, by all measures, is a very sort of high status man. So athletic, and then together traveling, and they both have an income, so they have money to spend. And then suddenly she then starts feeling these maternal desires that she's repressed until then. And she expresses that to him, and he, being under the impression that they were going to be childless together, because she'd up until then usually then said, I'm not sure I even want kids. That's for the future. We have a lot of time. So suddenly he's faced with this conversation that he didn't think he'd have to have, and committed enough to move in. They're usually living together, but not more than that. And then suddenly she sees people getting engaged, guys getting married, and freaks out. Just everyone, why aren't I moving forward? And then every one of those conversations will lead to a fight, because they both know what the other wants. It's not about communication. It's about just a different view, a different goal. Because as I said before, suddenly her goal has shifted to way over here, and they were both aligned. And this psychological distress that she's experiencing is because she's no longer aligned with her goal. That creates a lot of negative emotions for us. And then in therapy, she's faced with this. So what we'll have to do is to ascertain what is my anxiety of going back to the dating market with all that entails, and staying in the relationship. Because often, so what you have to do is measure one anxiety against the other. Because all she feels is that anxiety of, here it's safe in this relationship, and dating apps and being one of those girls, and I don't even know, I don't even have Tinder. Like, how do you do that? And all these men that she sees that she thinks is less attractive than the one she's with. And, very often she loves this man. They've been together for I don't know how many years. And, but so what needs to happen in therapy is so you need to really see, how afraid are you of staying in this situation for another 2 years? Right? So it's that what he wants. He doesn't want kids. He doesn't want to move in the direction you want to move in. So you have to sort of turn up the anxiety on that end in order to start dealing with the anxiety of, how do I go about being single again? Does that make sense? So you have to really look at the realities that this isn't, and if she's honest, she usually gets to a point where she sees, there's no future with him. He doesn't want what I want. And even if I force him into it, which she can do sometimes, she does, but that is then not a family life that I really want. So very often people in therapy, I find they're very narrow. They look, not narrow-minded, but, they have tunnel vision. And you need to help them think 5 and 10 years ahead, which is very difficult to do, especially for these women who they just did everything effortlessly. And so it was always clear 5 years in the future, I'll do this and this and that. And that usually happened for them. And so you need to put these two futures up against each other and see, what are you the most afraid of? And how can we make one of them manageable? Yeah.
And, it's different, the man in that relationship, he might decide to leave the relationship in 5 years. And it's just like, oh, now that I'm 40, now I want to try it. But at that stage, it's too late for the girl.
Yeah.
There's just these different clocks. And I just have this feeling, Hannah, as I'm listening to you talk, at just how much we have let down young people in our society, because a lot of this stuff is very, I know it's politically unpopular, but it's biological reality. And I mean, it's the ways that we probably would want our therapists to be talking to people about.
Yeah.
But many of them are so sucked up in the ideology of you can do it all, that we're misleading people.
Yeah.
And there's huge collateral damage. I feel it in my own life, and trying for that second kid, which is much harder, when you're in your mid to late 30s. And
Yeah.
I just think that there's been such little guidance from older generations.
Yeah, they really, I
In fact, I
blame
feel
the
like they're
boomers.
actively trying
Yeah.
to
And the Generation X.
I feel like in many ways it's actively misleading, and it breaks my heart. Honestly, this is probably one of the more uncomfortable interviews I do, because talking to you makes me feel pain in my heart. It really does when we're talking about something like this. These are really hard conversations.
Yeah, and everyone,
Yeah.
if it's not happening to you, then someone knows someone who's in that situation. This is why it's when I wrote this piece, why I am the anti-feminist psychiatrist, where I go through these archetypes. People, I could sort of hear them crying when they wrote their comments. This was me. This is exactly me. This is my girlfriend. And that was just painful, but it's what got me to do this work. It was that woman in her 30s. Because that was the pain. I could feel it. It was palpable to me. For other psychiatrists, there's other things that hit them, so they're objectively much worse situations. People have terrible lives. But just for me, this was very painful. And I said, it's so difficult to help them onto a track that alleviates the psychological distress. All we can do is preventative. But we cannot do preventative work if we don't define the pathogen. If we don't really nail down the mechanism with which this happens.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Hannah, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your very valuable wisdom with my audience. Can you take a moment just to explain how people can find you if they're interested in your message and what you do?
Yeah, so I have a Substack called Psychobabble. It's at Psychobabble with Spier. And I write, and I have a podcast there that I think you'll find very interesting. I talk about psychology, where psychology gets it wrong, psychologists, the bad therapy that's out there. I try to expose that. Also talk about psychiatric medications, and I talk a lot about how feminism has failed women. So yeah, I'm on Substack mostly. Also have a YouTube channel that's also at Psychobabble with Spier. So it should be easy to find. And yeah, I hope you come and check it out. But thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
It was a pleasure. If this interview struck a chord with you, you're definitely going to want to watch my video about why you should not tell your doctor if you're depressed.